Welcome to the 2023 Fentanyl Awareness Week courses. This campaign began to bring educational awareness to the fentanyl crisis in our community in the spirit of bringing the latest and best information to the public. A wide variety of organizations throughout the community have partnered together. The collaboration is housed under the Keep New Mexico Alive campaign, and detailed information can be found on keepnmalive.com. Welcome to today's course, Emerging Drug Trends. We will be turning things over to Miranda Lopez, Overdose Response Strategy of the Southwest Border from the New Mexico High Intensity Drug Trafficking Area, HIDTA. Miranda?
Good morning, everybody. I am Miranda Lopez. I am the New Mexico Public Health Analyst under the National Overdose Response Strategy, which is a collaboration between the Office of National Drug Control Policy and Center for Disease Control and Prevention. I am co-located with the New Mexico High Intensity Drug Trafficking Area Investigative Support Center, and I sit out of the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration here in Albuquerque. So just a little bit of background of the overdose response strategy. Each state in the nation has one public health analyst and one drug intelligence officer. Currently, my past drug intelligence officer has taken another position within New Mexico HIDTA, so that position is currently open and looking for a good candidate to fill that role. So today I'll be first talking about the three primary drug threats in New Mexico that we are facing as a state, and then also along the southwest border. First and foremost is fentanyl, which is classified as an opioid, and also known as M30s or blues here in the Albuquerque area, New Mexico in general. It's the most common name for them in the area. How is it consumed? A lot of us, don't know too much of a background, especially within the community. So today I brought you guys with some information as far as how is it consumed, what are the effects on the body, and how do, certain overdoses look, such as opioids, stimulants, etc. So fentanyl can be consumed either, snorted or sniffed. It can be smoked, orally, taken by pill or tablet. It could be spiked onto bottle paper, patches, sold alone or in combination with heroin and other substances. It has been, of course, identified in fake pills and mimicking pharmaceutical drugs such as oxycodone. The effect on the body are similar to other opioid analgesics, such as, fentanyl produces effects such as relaxation, euphoria, pain relief, sedation, confusion, drowsiness, dizziness, nausea and vomiting, urinary retention, pupillary constriction, and respiratory depression. And most importantly, what are the effects of an opioid overdose? First and foremost is loss of consciousness, markedly constricted or pinpoint pupils, breathing difficulties, whether it be slowed, labored, or irregular breathing, respiratory arrest, complete stopped breathing, choking, gurgling, or snoring sounds, blue or purple lips or fingertips, and being unresponsive to loud noises, shaking, or painful stimuli. And fentanyl is responsive to naloxone. What we've noticed these days, it's taking a lot more naloxone to bring an individual out of a fentanyl overdose due to the fact of its potency, etc. Our second primary drug threat is methamphetamine, which is a stimulant, and how it's used, it's in powder form, pill, smoked, snorted, injected to intensify the effects. Users may take higher doses of the drug, take it more frequently, or change their method of intake. And how does it affect the body? It's highly addictive, can make an individual become very agitated, increased heart rate or blood pressure, increased respiration and body temperature, anxiety, paranoia. High doses can cause convulsions, cardiovascular collapse, stroke, or death. And what are the effects of a stimulant overdose? So heart palpitations, hypertension, rapid breathing, dizziness, restlessness, confusion, hallucinations, panic states, muscle cramps, and tremors. And methamphetamine is non-responsive to naloxone. Our third primary drug threat in New Mexico is cocaine, also a stimulant. How it's used, it's snorted or dissolved in water and injected. Cocaine users may usually binge on the drug until they are exhausted or run out of cocaine. Crack cocaine is smoked. And how does it affect the body? Restlessness, irritability, anxiety, paranoia, dilated pupils, insomnia, loss of appetite, irregular heartbeat, ischemic heart conditions, sudden cardiac arrest, convulsions, strokes, and death. And tolerance builds quickly. It's very easy to overdose on cocaine. And same thing, it's a stimulant. So the effects of a stimulant overdose, I just went through those with methamphetamine. And this is also non-responsive to naloxone. I wanted to give you guys a quick idea as to how law enforcement seizures look throughout the state of New Mexico. And this data is inclusive of New Mexico HIDA regions, all region task forces. So this is year to date, January 1st of this year to this past Friday, actually. We have seen an increase in cocaine seizures. Currently, we're at 145 kilos seized by law enforcement. Methamphetamine, also known as ice, we're at 546 kilos in the state. Heroin is steadily on a decline here in New Mexico due to the fact that fentanyl has taken over the place of heroin in the state. In fentanyl, we have seized 1.1 kilos of powder. New Mexico isn't very prevalent for fentanyl powder itself. However, when you look at the dosage units in pill form, the state has seized 1,936,890 pills year to date. And then just down at the bottom, there's a couple more, such as psychostimulants, prescription drugs, different things like that. But this is currently what we were sitting at as of this past Friday. Here's a quick overview. This information is provisional and subject to change. This information is provided by the Office of Medical Investigators. This is all fatality data for 2022 and 2023 just this far. 2022 last year, provisionally, we had 923 deaths throughout the state of New Mexico, and all of those little points are where those deaths occurred on the map. Looking over at 2023, we have the first half of overdose fatality data inputted into our system, and we are currently sitting at 432. Bernalillo County every year makes up for half or more of fatal overdoses in our state. To give you guys more of an overview of how overdoses are looking, these are the substances involved in our fatal overdose cases in 2023 alone. Of course, our primary drug threats are listed at the top. Either one of those is in combination with the others listed. We are running into a lot of polysubstance use here in New Mexico. We're seeing an increase with cocaine and fentanyl together, methamphetamine and fentanyl together, and then just additional analogs also in combination has rapidly increased the overdoses here in the Bernalillo County area. There's a ton to go through. What we have seen is an increase in illicit benzodiazepine overdoses in New Mexico, and that's to include alprazolam, bromazolam, clonazepam. So that's something that we're starting to keep an eye on here in New Mexico. And then also xylazine, which hasn't been too prevalent here. However, there has been cases that have tested positive here. 1 in 17 cases are currently popping or testing positive for xylazine through the New Mexico State Crime Lab. And that's inclusive of all 3 crime labs across the state, Santa Fe, Hobbs, and Las Cruces. So we're still keeping a track on how xylazine has been affecting overdoses here in New Mexico as well. And this slide is something hard to take in. So we broke up our data, ages 0 to 21. fatal overdose statistics and substances involved here in New Mexico during the year of 2023, the first half. We, age 0 to 3, or age 0 to 1, there has been 3 deaths thus far up until June 27th. And 1 is already too many. And we are seeing a rapid increase in adolescent infant death due to overdose. Age 1 to 3, we've had 3 deaths. Age 4 to 18, we've had 7 deaths. And age 19 to 21, we've had 10 deaths. And under each of those are the substances involved within those cases. We've also been seeing an increase within our correctional facility deaths. Bernalillo County Metropolitan Detention Center has had 2 deaths as of June 27th of this year. Taos County Adult Detention Center had 2 deaths, and San Juan County Adult Detention Center had 1. And if you need anything, and any individuals, more than welcome to reach out to the New Mexico High Intensity Drug Trafficking Area Investigative Support Center and ask for myself. Our information is on newmexicohida.org. And yeah, my email is also listed if any other questions are needed.
Okay. I'm Sergeant Paul Montoya with the Bernalillo County Sheriff's Office. I supervise our fugitive unit, our auto theft unit, and what's relevant today is I supervise our narcotics unit. And my presentation is about the county's fight against fentanyl and the epidemic we're going through. So I've been with BCSO for 12 years. I've worked in the narcotics field for approximately 8 years. I've done work with the FBI, Homeland Security, DEA, New Mexico State Police. So I've kind of worked with a little bit of everybody and done a little bit of everything. And I currently supervise 3 full-time narcotics detectives who are also full-time task force officers with the DEA. So for those of you that don't know what that is, basically they are local law enforcement officers that are assigned over at the DEA, and they have the ability to investigate and charge federal crimes alongside DEA agents. We basically work as one team, so we bring the knowledge of the local community, being guys that were previously street cops and have that knowledge of these neighborhoods, and they work with the federal organization like the DEA, and they conduct large-scale investigations when applicable. And like I had said, I've been doing narcotics investigations for about 8 years. Recently, probably in the last 3 to 4 years, I've really seen fentanyl really become more prevalent in our community, and it's a big problem. One thing people don't know is fentanyl can be transdermal, which means it can go through the skin, and a dose as little as 2 milligrams can kill you from fentanyl. The amount in our streets, the amount of fentanyl in our streets has significantly dropped in price. I remember early on when pills would cost $10, $15, $20. Now they're as little as $1 if you buy in extreme bulk, as cheap as 60 cents a pill, which is extremely cheap. I think she previously mentioned that, there's a fall in heroin usage in our community, but that's because of basically the affordability and the strength of what fentanyl presents, which is an extreme concern for us, because if people can get fentanyl extremely cheap, they're going to buy it in bulk. I've seen some users of fentanyl smoke up to as much as 100 pills a day, which is an extraordinary amount of fentanyl. Like she said, they smoke it, people snort it, they ingest it, and that's extremely concerning. Obviously, most of the fentanyl pills have been smuggled, if not all of the fentanyl pills have been smuggled up here through Mexico, whether in pill form, in powder form, or whatever. It's very hard to stop, with the amount of law enforcement officers we have, whether it's Border Patrol, HSI, whatever the case is. As many cars as they stop, investigations that they conduct, they can stop one car and get a load of 20,000 fentanyl pills, but there's 8 cars that go by during that traffic stop that are full of fentanyl pills as well. That's really the big problem in the war on drugs that we have in our community, is just the sheer amount of narcotics that is making its way up from Mexico across our border. And as hard as we try, sometimes we just don't even put a dent in it. Within Bernalillo County, The Mexican drug cartels control almost entirely all of the drug trafficking, I would say. Yeah, there's local dealers that are not Mexican and they sell small amounts here. They may sell a boat, which is considered 1,000 pills of fentanyl. But really the cartel is so layered down. By the time you get to the boss of the cartel, by the time it reaches the streets, you're talking 12, 15 layers of hierarchy that make it down. So trying to really get to the source of supply is a tough deal. And even once you get to the source of supply, they may actually not really have any connection to the cartel, other than that they receive the bulk of narcotics from a distributor or whatever, what may have you. So my narcotics detectives, as well as pretty much all narcotics detectives in law enforcement, they use a variety of strategies to infiltrate traffickers, particularly fentanyl traffickers. We do this through undercover, through the use of confidential informants, whatever ways that we use to obtain search warrants in order to execute the search warrants, whether it be on houses, stash houses, vehicles, etc., in the hopes that we can gather evidence through those search warrants in order to charge the traffickers with either state or federal crimes. We receive tips from the public, reference trafficking, that may be going on in the neighborhood. I think that's important for members of the community that are here, that we receive all your tips and we follow up on those tips to hopefully lead them into investigations that can result in not only seizures of narcotics, but arrests as well. So fentanyl powder and precursors are used to produce illicit fentanyl pills. Non-pharmacy pill presses and things of that nature. So basically a pill press is the machinery that they use to create the pills out of the powder. When they're not, used by an official pharmacy or anything like that. So what's concerning is these pills do contain uneven amounts of fentanyl within the pill, which can be dangerous to the people that are using them, especially if you ingest them. There may be an extreme amount, higher dosage of fentanyl in one portion of the pill, or it may not be evenly distributed throughout the pills, which is concerning. Illicit fentanyl pill manufacturers begin mixing or cutting fentanyl with xylazine, as she mentioned earlier. What's concerning about xylazine in our community is that from what we've seen, it seems to not be able to be reversible by the use of Narcan. So all of the deputies within the Bernalillo County Sheriff's Office not only have, but they're trained on Narcan, which is basically used to reverse an overdose of an opioid like heroin or fentanyl. So what's concerning about xylazine is that when we go to use the Narcan, it's not working and it's not reversing the effect. Therefore, the overdose is continuing and leading to death in a lot of cases. So just a couple of things. These are two different pills, real or fake. Anybody have any guesses? No? You think the one on the left is fake? All right, go ahead. Is real? Go ahead. Oh, sorry, that's my fault. The one on the left is fake. Or your guys is, my right is fake. Sorry, we're looking at the same screen. Good. So our goal really is to educate the community of the dangers of fentanyl and to be able to properly investigate the trafficking of fentanyl within our community. About 69 deaths per 100,000 people in Bernalillo County as a result of fentanyl overdoses, which is extremely concerning. We at the Bernalillo County Sheriff's Office, like I mentioned earlier, we prosecute state and federally through the use of our TFOs, and we fostered a pretty good relationship with the U.S. Attorney's Office for federal charges. So what we also do is we investigate overdose deaths in conjunction with the DEA, in which we respond to DEA overdoses. Change it. Yeah, we respond to DEA overdoses, and we sometimes seize electronics, seize sometimes paperwork or anything like that, cell phones, that could lead us to the person that sold the fatal dose of fentanyl, and therefore we charge them. There is a federal charge for trafficking narcotics that result in a death. So there's just some information. This is our non-emergency line, which goes to our dispatch 798-7000. We take tips at 505-468-7111. And you can also go into any of our substations to give us a tip to the North Valley, South Valley, East Mountains. We do really follow up on these tips, and they have led to really good investigations throughout my tenure as a supervisor of this unit. So we do appreciate the tips that you guys give us, and we think that you're the best set of eyes in our community. And because we can't be everywhere all at once. So if you guys see something that's suspicious or a lot of activity, we like to hear about that and we like to follow up on it. So thank you guys.
I guess I'm up. Good morning. My name is Scott Garland. I'm the Assistant Special Agent in charge for the DEA up here in Albuquerque. So I have the northern part of the state of New Mexico. I'm going to talk to you today about drug poisonings, which is really our number one threat here. DEA maybe was a little slow to come around to this. We're used to working cocaine and heroin, and fentanyl took us a little bit by surprise with the opiate crisis and then turning into the fentanyl crisis. We think it's the most urgent threat to our communities right now, and we're definitely focusing on it. The CDC tells us that it's the leading cause of death for Americans aged 18 to 45. So you think about that range, that's a big range of Americans that this kills more than anything else. The numbers change every day, so I don't focus on the numbers. On the chart, it says 108,000. Every year, it seems to be more dying of fentanyl poisonings. The reason we're calling it poisonings rather than overdoses now is because we've realized that a lot of people that are dying from fentanyl didn't really even know what they were taking. They didn't know that they were going to poison themselves. So it truly is a poisoning. And we know who's responsible for this, for the indiscriminate poisoning and killing of Americans. And we're going after them. It's the Sinaloa cartel and Jalisco New Generation cartel, which we call JNGC. So we are taking this really seriously at our headquarters. We have a wall of honor of agents who have died on duty. And we also have this wall that is the pictures of people who have died from fentanyl poisonings. So people that work at our headquarters, when we visit our headquarters, we all walk past this wall and try to focus on why we do what we do. The CIA has a similar wall where they have victims of terrorism. It has a similar purpose. It's just to remind us every day that people are dying of this and that we need to do everything we can to stop it. So we've seen a market transformation. I know the chart is a little confusing, but the blue line on the chart going from 2019 to 2022 is heroin, which is traditionally, like I said, what we've worked, the opiate that we've seen most abused. And fentanyl has just kind of slowly taken its place. Big difference, heroin is, there's a limited growing season for poppies. They can only be grown in a limited geographic area. They're dependent on weather, and there's a lot of physical labor involved in harvesting the opium gum from the poppy plant. Fentanyl, on the other hand, it's not seasonal. It's just a chemical that's manufactured, and it's made of chemicals that are used in legitimate products. So it's really hard for us to control the chemicals. So the chart here shows, I guess, transit of drugs from the cartels, the sources of supply, which we know the major sources of supply are Sinaloa and CJ&G. So it shows how these cartels distribute their drugs throughout our country. They're ruthless, violent organizations. Their business model is expansion and profit. They don't necessarily care that people are dying over this, just that they're making money. We think they're intentionally poisoning Americans to drive their profits higher. Like I said before, people don't always know that they're ingesting fentanyl. Most of the time, it's in pill form that are made to look like legitimate pharmaceutical drugs. They are also adulterating cocaine, heroin, and methamphetamine with fentanyl because the fentanyl has such a powerful effect and it's so much cheaper than all those other drugs to produce. We know that they're precursors for this drug. They're importing most of it from China, and we're trying to control that too. So the blue areas on this are the Sinaloa cartel, and the green areas are controlled by CJ&G. The striped areas have presence of both, and the gray areas are controlled by other cartels. Part of Los Zetas, the Gulf Cartel, Cartel de Nostra, control those other gray areas. So it's a global criminal enterprise in a very true sense. You can see from this chart that they have a presence, these two cartels have a presence all over the world. The chemicals are coming from China and India. And those chemicals are used to produce fentanyl and methamphetamine. So a simple representation of the production supply chain. Chemicals go to the labs in Mexico. They come in huge quantities and they're available at very cheap prices. It's the binding agent in the pills you see on the street that give it the color. The color of the pills don't indicate the strength or the potency at all. They're using it as a marketing gimmick. Now we're seeing rainbow fentanyl pills. And you can imagine who that's marketed to. I don't know that adults care that there's a variety of colors in their fentanyl pills. It's more exciting to youth, I think. The pills now are mostly being pressed by the drug trafficking organizations. They're not using any scientific method for doing this. They're not trying very hard to control the potency in the pills, and there's no quality control. So we've seen fentanyl, which is 50 times more potent than heroin. Just 2 milligrams of fentanyl, tiny amount fit on the tip of a pencil. That's a potentially deadly dose. So we're seeing 6 out of 10 now pills that we test in our laboratories, that we seize and test in our laboratories. And by the way, just my office alone last year seized over 130 kilograms of fentanyl pills. The year before, we seized almost double that because we were involved in a lot more interdiction. So in this area, there's a lot of fentanyl pills that are transiting the area and being distributed in other places. More than half of those are deadly. That's an increase from 2021. And we'll see what happens in 2023. I don't have those figures yet. So the lab says the average fentanyl pill is 2.34 milligrams of fentanyl. And remember, 2 milligrams is a deadly dose. So if you took all the fentanyl pills we seized, ground them up, and made pills out of them again, every one of those pills would be a deadly dose for somebody who is an opiate tolerant. Of course, as you use opiates, you can become more tolerant to them, and that might not be a deadly dose for that particular person, but for the average person, it's a deadly dose. When doctors prescribe fentanyl, they do it in microdoses, which is just tiny little bits of milligrams, because the doctors are aware of how dangerous fentanyl can be, and they're careful in the dosing. So we've seen a lot of technology being used in the distribution of fentanyl pills. It used to be that my agents would have to have an introduction into an organization to buy drugs. It's no longer the case. They're running into this on social media, and they're able to buy pretty much any amount of fentanyl pills without any sort of introduction or anybody vouching for them. Your kids can do this too. You can do it. You can go on social media. If you have a cell phone, there's no legitimate prescription pill you're going to buy over social media. So all of these pills are generally fentanyl. We should all be talking to our kids about this because they're going to see it. They're going to be offered it on social media. Money payments for these drugs can be made through these apps, through these social media sites. The traffickers are using emojis. I don't know if these are very good representations of emojis, but it gives you the idea of how they're communicating, how they're using code language. We've always seen that. Now they're using it online. And they're definitely being used by the traffickers on the internet to traffic these drugs to our kids. So what have we done? We formed strategic targeting teams. We have counter threat teams targeting the cartels, Sinaloa and CJ&G. Drug poisoning response teams, which was previously mentioned. We've had that for about 3 years now here. We weren't the first to start it, but we were in the leading edge. And we're doing whatever we can to try to target these poisoning deaths and target the drug dealers that are selling this stuff to our community. We're also running family summits where people that have been affected by these overdose deaths, which I have a hard time finding anybody who hasn't, whether it's your own family or somebody else close to you. I think we've all been affected by it. We run these family summits and we get together with the families and we try to find better solutions for targeting the cartels and dealing with these deaths. So one of the presentations that I do a lot is a One Pill Can Kill presentation. It's an educational effort to get the word out to everybody that the pills they're fake, they're not real prescription pills, they're deadly, one pill can kill you, they're everywhere, they're cheap, they're accessible. If somebody offers you a pill and you don't know where it came from, you shouldn't take it. If it wasn't prescribed to you personally, filled by a pharmacy with your name on the bottle, it's not a legitimate pill and you shouldn't take it. This website we have started, it's dea.gov, One Pill, has all the information on this. It gets updated regularly. I hope you'll all visit it. I hope you'll have your kids visit it and you'll pass on the word that this information exists. And I think by getting the information out is really the best way we have of attacking the problem right now. So another thing we're doing with the DEA is we run Operation Overdrive. It's targeted to cities throughout the U.S. You can see Albuquerque's highlighted there. We're about to go into a new phase of Operation Overdrive. So we're targeting, using data, we're targeting the specific areas in a community that are seeing the most overdose or poisoning deaths and drug trafficking of fentanyl. We're trying to have an impact in those really active areas, which we hope will achieve a wider impact in the community. So that's all I have. Thank you. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer. Yes, sir.
When it is seized, how is it disposed of?
Yeah, so we're really careful handling it because it can be a dangerous exposure to the agents that are handling it. We have vent hoods and gloves and a specific manner of handling it. When it's brought into the office, it's in our loading dock area. It doesn't go beyond there before it's packaged securely and sealed. We don't keep much of it in our office. It pretty much immediately goes out to the laboratory. The laboratory tests a representative sample, maintains a sample of it for future court use, and the rest is destroyed. I believe it's done by incineration, but I'm no expert in that. The lab does that. I've been with DEA for 32 years, and I've worked methamphetamine much of that time. So there was a time where people were producing methamphetamine in the United States, and that isn't happening as much anymore because of the super labs down in Mexico. So it's certainly more potent than I call it Beavis and Butthead labs, you know, that they used to have in the United States, where the people didn't really know what they were doing. They had a recipe and they do it almost like baking a cake, and sometimes they'd run into problems and the cake wouldn't turn out so good. Well, in Mexico, it always turns out good, but methamphetamine is a particular chemical structure. So it varies in purity, and we call it crystal meth. Almost all the meth coming in is crystal meth, so it's very, very high purity. But I guess the point of my presentation today is that's getting displaced by fentanyl, because it's much more expensive and dangerous to produce methamphetamine than it is fentanyl. So the chemicals might vary, the process might vary, but really the takeaway is that even if you're buying meth, and if you think about this, meth is a stimulant, and fentanyl is a central nervous system depressant, so it doesn't make any sense. But the users of methamphetamine are getting fentanyl, and they like the fentanyl. Everybody likes the fentanyl. You know, the meth, people like too. You know, you can't play around with meth and kind of still be okay. It's something takes over your life, and fentanyl kind of does the same thing, even though they're on opposite sides of the pharmaceutical spectrum. So as an agency, we're targeting xylazine. We have not seen a lot of it here that I've seen come back. Seen it on the north side of the state. PJ, maybe you can comment on that a little better.
We've just seen a couple. It's not a huge problem yet, but it's a problem that's on the horizon. And I think we need to work in conjunction with the DEA. Yeah, he is making a good point about it being more in the northern state than here in Bernalillo County. We have seen a few cases. I think in particular, I think we had one overdose death that was related to it. But I do think it's on the horizon. It's something we need to really look at, because like you said, Narcan does not work to reverse the effects of the overdose, which is a concern. And like I said, we do work in conjunction with the DEA, reference to all the overdose deaths. So hopefully we'll, unfortunately, till we run into it more, we don't have a ton of answers on it right now. And unfortunately, we're going to have to run into it more, but when we run into it, it's not always going to be the best situation.
One additional comment just before I hand it over to Dr. Warwick to give more of a medical standpoint. As I mentioned, there has been 1 in 17 cases testing positive for xylazine in the state of New Mexico. And that's coming out of the New Mexico State Crime Lab through the Department of Public Safety. And Dr. Warwick, I'm not sure if you wanted to give more of a medical standpoint as far as what xylazine overdoses may look like, or.
Sure. So from a few levels, Department of Health and other agencies over the last couple of years, we've increased our ability to do testing in people. And I think there's a big difference between what we're seeing in New Mexicans and what's being trafficked through the state. The good news is at this point, we're not seeing a lot of xylazine in the clinical setting, and they're very rare. The xylazine pharmacologically is an alpha-2 agonist. Clonidine would be in that category, with dexmedetomidine, which we use in the hospital, both medical. As far as differentiating xylazine from fentanyl, you can't do it clinically, or it's very difficult to do it clinically. We rely on lab to kind of help with that. Some of it send out tests. As far as treatment goes, go ahead and give the naloxone. If they don't respond, then we start bagging. Then we start being more aggressive on other modalities in our treatment. A lot of the refractory cases from naloxone are because that there's co-ingestants, and I think we're starting to hear that from, even in the room, people are mixing things together.
So the main takeaway is always administer Narcan, no matter what. You know what I mean? If it's if you suspect it's an overdose, you want to administer that naloxone as soon as possible.
My name is Ryan Nelson. I agreed to take time from my speech, so I took my 150 page presentation down to like 6 for everybody else. So I'm just going to do a quick overview, and I'm glad I'm going now because I was able to adjust on the fly my presentation so we're not too redundant. You can go to the next slide. So there's a series of pictures in the slides. These are pictures from Albuquerque bus. I am in charge of the narcotics unit at APD for the region task force, which is housed out of DEA. Our gun teams for Albuquerque Police Department, which do proactive and reactive investigations. And I think that's it. It's changed a lot recently. So, you know, just like this slide says, fentanyl most abundantly sees street drug, meth is second. And like you guys have indicated, and we've indicated on this panel that we're seeing an increased combination of both the sale and use. And I took this picture from my phone, and I just wanted to use this as a representation of what we see pretty much every single day in Albuquerque in terms of the bus that we do. Go to the next one. So we hit briefly on social media. We started really working social media heavily in around 2020, right at the initial onset of, you know, the COVID pandemic. And at that time, it was the wild west of drug trafficking on social media. You could get robbed, killed, or successful purchase of fentanyl during that time. Hasn't completely changed from that, but people were getting robbed on a daily basis, purchasing from social media. We currently we're monitoring well over 100 social media chat rooms where the primary objective is to sell fentanyl, fentanyl, meth. And these are some pictures that are from my phone from bus that we did. Top left, that's what 1,000 pills look like in each bag. So that's 5,000 pills. There's some speckled fentanyl that we've seen. There's like a larger bust on the bottom. I think that's about 100,000 fentanyl pills. And then, of course, the candy colored fentanyl pills. Go to the next one. So talk briefly about our partnerships. And I wanted to talk about the violent crime aspect of fentanyl trafficking that we've been seeing. So we work closely with DEA and ATF as of recently, and then HIDA, which is a great resource for us because that helps us work with all the other local law enforcement partners in specific areas throughout the state. In addition to that, we work with the federal agencies. So what I wanted to talk about was we've got, and so these are fentanyl, fentanyl meth on the right, it's fentanyl on the left. I think that's 65,000 pills. And in the center is, I think, a couple $100,000 that was going back to Mexico. So I wanted to bring up NIBIN. That's a National Integrated Ballistic Information Network. What we've seen a lot is I can't remember a time where we did a drug bust where there weren't guns involved, and that's really important for us. Because violence and drugs is a very common aspect of our community. And NIBIN is, and could you switch to the next one? Because I think there's some pictures that would help. Yep. So NIBIN is like a fingerprint for a bullet casing that identifies a specific gun that was used. And it works just like a fingerprint in that there's no two that are exactly alike. And that helps us identify a crime gun without any worry that that's a mistake. And so we can take casings from a scene where there was a drive-by shooting and identify it with a gun that we seize, because then we test the gun in a lab, we pull the trigger, shoots off a round, we test that casing, and then we can link those together. And now we can go after that original crime, or more likely than not, a series of crimes to include shootings, potentially homicides, things like that. So this is an aspect that we work closely with ATF to address both drugs and violent crime in our community. I just wanted to highlight that, and if there are any questions about that, I'd be happy to answer them.
So, Ryan, I have a question. You mentioned that the number of homicides in our community. What are the percentage of the homicides that are related to drug deals? And then, you then have fentanyl as a common denominator.
That's a difficult question. A lot of times, so identifying the aspect of fentanyl it varies. So specifically to a drug deal, it's pretty high. I'd say around a third of our homicides are involving drug deals gone bad, attempted robberies, things like that. But considering fentanyl being involved, it's much, much higher, just involved. And so you can speculate as to, what part it played into it. I would say a significant role in the vast majority of them. Maybe not domestic violence related situations, but for these, for most others, I would say the vast majority of them involve in some way or another fentanyl.
Thank you. And I have another question for DEA, Bernalillo County Sheriff's Office, and Albuquerque Police Department. In the number of years, I've heard the number of years of experience that you all have in working in your organizations. In the years of experience that you've been doing what you do, how would you consider the drug crisis in comparison to years ago that we have now related to fentanyl?
It's the worst I've ever seen. There's no comparison. You have over 100,000 people dying every year of a drug. We've never seen that before. So there's no contest. Currently, it's as bad as it's ever been.
Thank you.
I think there's multiple factors when you look at it. I think amount of drugs on the street wise, how cheap the fentanyl is, and the outcome of the fentanyl usage within our community. I agree with ASAC Garland saying it's the worst it's been, and that's not close. We, like Lieutenant just talked about, the violent crimes that occur out of it, as well as property crimes. Auto theft, handguns, and fentanyl are almost found together every single auto theft vehicle that we arrest, because I also supervise the auto theft unit. So that's one way we kind of try to go after people and their crimes, is being found in possession of firearms or being in possession of firearm with fentanyl in a stolen car. I do think that we as a community have to make a choice as to how are we going to prosecute these crimes. I do think that a lot of these traffickers, and this may not be the most politically correct thing to say, they get off pretty easy, especially on the state side charging wise. They are able to plea it down to, simple possession probably? If that. They plea down a simple possession, get 6 months probation maybe, and they're out doing the same thing the next day. They're not being held accountable, they're not staying in jail, and they're not serving any prison sentences for trafficking these narcotics. So I think in conjunction with the amount and cheapness of the narcotics, with the lack of consequences for not only the usage, but the sale, the distribution, etc., is creating a monster that has gotten out of control. And I think we as a community have to make a decision as to, one, how are we going to hold them accountable? And two, what are we as a community going to do service-wise to help the people that are addicted to these narcotics? Because really, the cartels are the enemy, but we're our own worst enemy because we are the consumers in this situation. If we didn't pay money for these drugs to get from the cartels would not exist. So, it is what it is.
So I've been with the Albuquerque Police Department for about 20 years, and I've been working drug crimes since about 2006. So I've seen the ebb and flows of all the different things. When we used to make meth, like we discussed earlier, here in the States, which our meth lab is covered in dust right now, which I'm kind of thankful for, to be honest, because that was very dangerous for us. But that just means there's so much more potent meth here locally that you can get at a much cheaper rate. It's not worth making it on your own, is what that is. In terms of fentanyl, like Dave described, I've never seen anything like it. It's more abundant than anything I've ever seen. I've seen more small time, big time, more traffickers for all the other drugs combined. There are more fentanyl dealers out there today. And, you know, on the social media aspect, if you were so inclined, you can go find fentanyl today and you can meet somebody. You know, you're good chance you're going to get robbed because you don't see those red flags, which a lot of people don't. So there's a lot of users that have been robbed multiple times. And if you were so inclined, you could pick up thousands of pills if you wanted to and start selling on your own and support your habit that way, or just try to make it your own entrepreneurship.
Thank you.
All right. I'm Brandon Warwick. I'm a physician at UNM. I'm triple board in emergency medicine, medical toxicology, addiction medicine. I get to practice all three specialties. And part of one of my goals of the talk is to bring all of my specialties together to try to help with this. So go ahead, next slide. I don't have any financial disclosures to give as a physician. I'm not going to be talking about any off-label use of medications. I do have external money that provides outside of the walls of UNM, but they're all government sponsored. Next slide. My objectives here is I wanted to go over a brief epidemiology, and honestly, I think my other presenters, my other colleagues up here have done a wonderful job, and I'm going to go through that extremely fast. And then I want to talk about some of the addiction mindset, what the science as well. So next slide. So this is basically just demonstrating, and very quickly, that we healthcare in general are prescribing a whole lot less opioid than we ever used to. And in 2020, latest numbers is about half of what we were at our peak. Just for orientation, all this didn't fit on the one slide from the CDC, but the column on the left is the year, middle is the amount dispensed, and the number on the right is basically on a population base. Next slide. Overdose deaths are increasing. I don't think this is a surprise to anybody. Next slide. This is state specific. What has me concerned as an ER physician, as an addiction medicine physician, is the rate of methamphetamine going up that we're seeing. Again, a lot of these are going to be combined with fentanyl, but the reason I'm concerned with the methamphetamine is I don't have good medical treatment for it like I do with fentanyl or heroin. The best treatment that we have is a type of psychology, contingency management based on intermittent reward, and currently Medicare and Medicaid do not fund or pay for that treatment. Next slide. I think we've seen plenty of counterfeit pills today. I'm just going to these were the ones with the white background. Those are the legitimate ones. The other ones are counterfeit and obtained here in the state. Next slide. This was a project that I had originally done with the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, or in conjunction with them, and putting a business plan together. We've talked about how cheap fentanyl is. And so this was a business plan that I had put together. My goal was, if I had a $10,000 investment, because, hey, you know, I could scrounge something up with credit cards, an advance paycheck, whatever. What could I do with that in terms of a drug business? So a kilogram of fentanyl in the powder form is $3,000 to $4,000 per kilo. That's been about the same throughout for the last 5-6 years. Pill presses have come down in price, But the ones that my other colleagues up here were showing, they're going for about $1,000 a piece. I just decided I'd have two, just as a backup in case one breaks mechanically. We'll have some dyes, other materials, the things that hold the pills together. We've got a little over $1,000. I'm still holding $2,000 in cash reserves. So if you hit next, it won't be the next slide. But then on the sales side, if I put 1 milligram in pills, which is kind of what law enforcement is seeing, doing the math, that results in 1 million pills. If I do $5 a pill, which is really what the end user is buying on the street today, that's $5 million in profit. When I look at this as a cartel model, I'll split 50-50 with the distributor, and I'm still taking home $2.5 million on a $10,000 investment. Again, I would like to correct my esteemed colleague to my right and say that this is pennies on the dollar. This isn't even pennies to produce a pill. When we start seeing on the wholesale price where this is 50 cents a pill, there's plenty of room for additional profit. When I compare that to heroin, which has historically been $30,000 to $50,000 per kilogram is the street value of it, the cartels have a lot of room to go down on the price and still be very profitable. At the same time, this is also one of those points where I'd like to pause and just to say and thank you to Lisa asking the last question, with the collective experience that my law enforcement colleagues have up here. In my opinion, as a physician, we have given them an impossible task to try to stop this drug from coming in when there's this much profitability. Part of my take is we also need to work together. We need to also be decreasing the demand. Next slide. So my colleagues have already pointed out the emojis and the ease of selling online. And I also want to introduce the concept of multi-level marketing. So this is a very effective marketing campaign made famous by Mary Kay, Avon, Tupperware, Amway, a variety of different companies. Those of you who have social media, I'm sure you have your friend or friends, plural, that have sold out weight loss, get healthy, feel better, that new cleanse on here. Again, those are type of marketing. At the top are the people who are making the profit. That's the cartels. These are people who they probably aren't using it on a regular basis. They're people who are preying on our families, on our community to get money. The people at the bottom oftentimes are selling the drug or doing whatever just to try to feed into the habit, and we'll define what addiction and the habit is here upcoming. The interesting thing and the challenge for us is all these people are interchangeable. Everybody wants to be at the top. Everybody wants to move up where there's a little bit more money and start assuming that. Again, we've got $1 trillion industry. This isn't $1 trillion industry, and how do we move that much product without public advertising? Working at UNM Hospital, I'm not naive and recognize that there's drug deals that go down in the patient rooms every day. And that's part of what our community is looking at. Next slide. So, as I alluded to, we need to define what the illness here. And so basically the Diagnostic Statistics Manual is in the 5th version, and the DSM is what defines us with a substance use disorder. Basically all the substances, whether it's alcohol, stimulants, opioid, etc., use the same criteria. And basically, I need 2 or more of these criteria to start meeting a substance use disorder. And we start making the impact when it starts affecting our health, when it starts affecting our relationships, and we're unable to cut down. This works, for example, with alcohol. I, on night off, will have a drink. But what separates me from somebody with alcohol use disorders, I have control. When I'm on call for the Poison Center, I'm not drinking. When I'm working, I'm not drinking. I have the control. As far as physiologic tolerance goes, that's huge in the opioid area. The amount that my patients who are coming to me from an addiction standpoint in care that are on in fentanyl, these 100, and I've had them too with the 100 pills a day, that would kill me. That would kill the whole panel up here. but the patient has assumed the tolerance for being able to control that. And that's part of what we use for addiction. And then having consequences. Are they having unfilled work obligations, interpersonal problems, dangerous persons? As a rule of thumb, if you're buying fentanyl off the street and you're engaging in these dangerous activities, you probably have a substance use disorder. Unfortunately, healthcare, in my opinion, has not really stepped up in the years and has put the burden on the shoulders of law enforcement. But I think we're starting to start coming around to engaging in more treatment. With that said, that's my segue into my next slide. So as far as where does addiction come from, and I think we start getting into the biology of motivation. And we have two primary drivers. One that feels good. This is positive reinforcement. So the neurotransmitter dopamine is released by the nuclear accumbens in the brain. It makes us we want more of it, and we seek out and do more. This is what I refer to as the classic pathway with addiction is like, hey, I'm at a party, we're having fun, I want that party never to stop, and we just keep going. What is the atypical, but has me more concerned, and what we see another 50% of the time is the negative reinforcement pathway. This goes by the amygdala. And basically the amygdala creates our anxiety or fear or distress. When I teach to medical students or physicians, one of the things that I always say is like, hey, we've got a board exam coming up. I've got my research for my med talks coming up in 2024. And I know I need to work on that. But as the date becomes closer, I'm going to start getting more anxious and more motivated to get it done. And I think we all kind of feel this too. But oftentimes when we have an extreme level of those emotional fears or anxiety, it's how do I start quieting those thoughts down? And just as the drug relieves the physical pain, it also relieves mental pain. And a lot of people are self-treating. The VA has made famous our war heroes coming with a traumatic amputation. And I don't think there's anybody who's going to argue that traumatic amputation of a leg and arm isn't a painful event, that the patient needs an opioid analgesic. Fentanyl is one I've given thousands of times to thousands of patients over my career in the emergency department. And that'd be one of the top ones I personally, as an ER physician, would go for even before the fentanyl epidemic. But as they're struggling to cope with loss of that limb and how they're going to function, they're also thinking, man, my buddy died in this. Why am I the one who survived? Why am I here? And I knew something wasn't right. I saw that person over there running and it didn't look right and I didn't say anything. And they have that guilt. And they start also using the drug to numb the pain. And consequently, 2-3 months later, when they're healed from a medical standpoint, we haven't addressed their mental pain. And that's where, and then they find out that they can't just abruptly cut down the drug as they're starting to develop the addiction pathway. And 50%, the clinical studies, 50% go through that negative reinforcement pathway. It's higher in women than it is men. Than positive reinforcement. So very important. And again, something that I talked to my son who's only 11 on when as part of my drug talk, and like when you're feeling bad, it's not a time to have a drink. Next slide. This is demonstrating PET or neuroimaging of the brain. So again, we talked about dopamine feeling good, and with the normal brain, red is a higher intensity. And what we've seen in the chronic user is they just don't have the good feelings that we who don't use have. At the same time, when we look at that amygdala, the negative reinforcement, they're not having that much higher. Again, this is an example I like to use when I teach as somebody who smokes or uses nicotine. Is do you get a high after you've been smoking for 5 to 10 years? And the answer is nobody does. A lot of our patients, by the time they're coming to us with help, they're not feeling that high. They're using to avoid those negative pathways and that amygdala activity. Next slide. This is a demonstration neurobiologically of what buprenorphine does in the brain and how basically it helps quiet that extra activity down globally through the brain, working medically. The slide I'm using here, and the slides with the neurobiology, the peer review process is dictated by an act of Congress, and the only peer review process that I've seen dictated by an act of Congress. Next slide. As far as medication for substance use disorder, when I teach physicians, I like to ask, do you know of any other drug or any other medical intervention that has such broad outcomes as for substance medication for opioid use disorder? We've got, and I can't think of anything. We've got improved survival and retention to treatment, but we've got decreased criminal activity. When I'm looking at, and this is my colleagues, you're welcome to update me on my numbers, but pre-pandemic, it was $35,000 to $45,000 per year per inmate to house somebody. That becomes a lot of money to house somebody, and if we can prevent them from doing the crimes in the first place, and even if they're working at a minimum wage job at a greasy spoon, they're at least paying into taxes. So from a cash flow from a government funding, these are decisions that we need to make too. Increasing somebody's gainful employment and also important is improving birth outcomes. The improvement in survival is among the best that we have in all of medicine, and using multiple studies looking at that. We're looking at people with substance use disorder in treatment versus not in treatment, a different survival benefit of approximately 70%. Next slide. This is going to be a quick series of slides, but the medical organizations are starting to line up, and I want to highlight the American Academy of Pediatrics for being the first to recommend treatment with medication, specifically buprenorphine, back in 2016. A year later, next slide, the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology came along, recommending this as first-line therapy. Again, speaking to physicians, I know of no other therapy that has been leading in charge by physicians treating pregnant women and children. A year later, the American College of American College of Medical Toxicology. Interestingly enough, I'm an author on that one, the one I start getting tongue-tied on. But we brought in and were endorsed by the two major ER organizations to be hospitals to be starting to initiate care for this. The American College of Emergency Medicine, next slide, has also signed on with their position statement. The American Academy of Emergency Physicians has their statement. The American Board of Emergency Medicine, who board certifies me, as well as others, have made highlighting and learning education on addiction priority for all ER physicians. Next slide. As far as duration of treatment, I'm asked this a lot, and up to this point in time, there are no clinical trials where we've looked beyond a year at how long do people need to be maintained. When we start taking people off within a year, we start having people kind of fall out or relapse. The current opinion amongst addiction physicians, as we've gone through also internal review boards, which oversee ethical, making sure that research is ethical, is basically it's felt that patients are on their medication for opioid use disorder as long as it feels that it benefits them. We do have there is an ongoing clinical trial that UNM was part of, that it has stopped enrolling patients and is now following them to outcome on people who are stable beyond a year and trying to see how they have titrated down. Next slide. This is a big project that I have worked on. So the New Mexico Poison Center, where my physical office is, we are of the 55 poison centers, the only poison center to be taking addiction call. And we've been doing this for nearly 3 years now. This is a free call to you and to your friends, your family in the state of New Mexico. We have a series of pharmacists who receive basically a 2-year on-the-job training, and then they sit for an exam, and the exam is difficult. There's about an 80% pass rate. We have currently have maintained a 100% pass rate for people who are eligible of the board. Basically, whatever addiction questions that you have, we're ready for. The two things that we cannot do is, one is write for medications, and number two is get you an appointment to see a doctor. But as far as, questions about, buprenorphine or whatever, we're happy to help. If your physician has questions, there's 3 of us who are boarded in addiction medicine, are happy to speak to your physician and help walk them through this. Another project that we're doing is the New Mexico Bridge Program. We've worked with more than a half dozen hospitals across the state, really trying to enhance addiction care to be able to, the goal is for somebody showing up who's in withdrawal, is struggling, and they're at a crossroads, they can choose to go to their user. We want them choosing medical help, medical treatment. Next slide. As far as, this is a project that I've done a lot of work on, as far as the safety of fentanyl and occupational exposure, the American College of Medical Toxicology, American Academy of Clinical Toxicology put out a position statement some years back in 2017, and basically recommending handle fentanyl with gloves. There's a risk for, and recommended a mask, basically COVID precautions, and it's unlikely that you will have any ill effects. So while fentanyl is absorbed through the skin, this has been known and FDA approved for over 50 years. Or excuse me, the FDA approval hasn't been quite 50 years, but we've studied it for 50 years. And you basically have to have fentanyl covering your entire hand and leave it there for an entire day to have them to get the absorption needed for an illness. The other thing to think about is if you get it on your skin, remember this is a drug, this isn't a bacteria or this isn't a virus, so hand sanitizer isn't going to work, so wash your hands. I have, while not available for this, I've just completed a massive search of all of the world's literature involved, some of my colleagues around the world, including research librarians, trying to find cases of somebody getting ill working on the job, and I'm unable to find any in that. So we'll have that coming out as a peer-reviewed article. Next slide. So in conclusion, I think substance use disorder isn't going to go away. And I think a big part of cutting off any reduction in supply also needs to be met with an increase in addiction care and trying to decrease the demand for the drug as well. With that, do you guys have any questions?
One thing I do want to mention is the individual sitting up here, yes, we are experts in our own fields, but we're also just a member of the community, just like everybody else. And, it's happening in our backyards. We drive past it every single day. And, we're here to work with you and hear you out as far as what do you think will best fit the needs of where you're at, whether it be throughout the state or here in Bernalillo County. Hearing the community is the most valuable thing. Your voice is the most valuable thing that you have. And we encourage you to use it to speak up when you see an issue, to speak with your law enforcement, when you see them out in public. Ask them questions. That's what they're here for, is to provide you with the service that you need to help you better understand the situations that we're facing on a day-to-day basis. I know the transparency here in our state is not very clear, and that's something that we're trying to really work on and build up, is to have more of a transparency of how, fentanyl looks on a day-to-day basis here in our state. Recently, it's become, more known, but it's something that we don't see every day, for example, on the news or on our radio stations, different things like that. So anything that you need, law enforcement partners, health partners are always here to answer your questions, and we encourage you to visit all of our sites, DEA.gov, NewMexicoHIDA.org. UNM has our website, Bernalillo County has our website, and so does Albuquerque Police Department. There's so many resources that you can access off of those websites to help answer your questions and best fit your needs for yourself, your friends, and your family.
Can I add one last thing? So we brought up, the rehabilitation process and how expensive it is. I've been speaking about this for a while, and I just wanted to bring it up for a topic to think about. Asset forfeiture has stopped in the state of New Mexico in around 2015. I'll use one example. Late last year, we seized over $1 million in currency from a drug trafficking organization. It had over 1 million fentanyl pills, 150 pounds of meth. We don't participate in asset forfeiture in the state. I would propose that the state forfeitures go back to, I couldn't think of a more beautiful, we take it from the drug dealers, give it back to rehabilitation for the community. So I'm proposing something like that.
I want to second that.
Thank you, Ryan, and thank you, Dr. Warwick. That is very important. And that's something that we need to look at for legislation and for changes. So I do have a question for Dr. Warwick, and it's just to reemphasize the statement that you made, that you can't overdose by touching fentanyl, and you can't overdose by touching drugs that are maybe being consumed by somebody else. Can you clarify
Sure.
that again?
Fundamentally, what has to happen is the drug has to end up in the brain. And just looking at it, sure, there's the visual neurons, it's not there. Like I said, the dermal absorption is we've studied this when Janssen Pharmaceuticals developed it in the late 1960s, early 1970s. And the slow absorption, we have the fentanyl patch. We use it dermally in medicine because it's a very slow, deliberate amount that's absorbed. All the different manufacturers, we've looked at this, you really need 30 to 36 hours of that application of the patch to be able to get to therapeutic levels of that. So again, if you accidentally touch fentanyl, whether it's in the powder, liquid form, it needs time to be absorbed to your skin, and it's just not there.
Thank you. Well, in closing, we would like to thank our wonderful panel and everyone for your attendance today. It is our hope that this course has served as a starting point to a longer discussion and continued interest in bringing awareness and understanding to the drug problems in our community. It is our hope that this course has triggered each of you to take an active role in partnering to make a difference in raising awareness to the dangers of the drugs in our community. For more information, you can also visit the keepnmalive.com website for available resources and to learn more about what's going on related to fentanyl. If you're interested to continue to receive information in regards to what Bernalillo County and our partners are doing, you can be added to a distribution list. So if you can visit the front table where you signed up. So with that being said, I'd like to give our wonderful panel a round of applause and thank you all for being here today.